But you look so alone as I walk on by.
The most hardcore, some of them talk, but lacking in character. How can I relax when it's theft of innocence? The harmless are broken. Oh, what tragedy to meet death with the lost word unspoken. Hide it behind the foundations, charity constructed, house of euthanasia. Architects of house of cards remain hidden behind one noble cause, extravagant facade. Masquerading as God, I don't buy it at all. I like the real thing raw, I tell the whole veil off. The lights on or off, I get mine either way. The stellar man in effect, I leave you free and breathless like true psychedelic acceptance. Worldview becomes transcendent. This midnight smoke is so high octane, paralyzing the presence. Hello everyone and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on earth. And we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. This episode will be a continuation of the Israel-Hamas war. I did this 2 weeks ago and I'm back in my home studio without my microphone. Forget the microphone. We're gonna do things differently and see how it goes. The audio turns out decent. And since we're talking about war, we're going to be talking about the war between Israel and Hamas, the war near the Gaza Strip. So let's do it in a war-like atmosphere, not a studio atmosphere. So that's the plan. I didn't mention this is episode 47. This is Saturday, October 28th, 2023. Episode 47. We're coming up on almost a year of this show being in existence. So just about a month, and we'll have the year. We'll have this year in tyranny. We'll do something like that. So I mentioned last week and the week before that this episode was going to be about the coordination and organization level of what's going on in Israel, specifically the coordination between Hamas members and the way everything turned out with such a high level of precision. The Hamas terrorist attacks were very successful, horribly successful in the death toll, and it seemed like everything worked out as planned. It was a devastating attack, and the war continues. So we'll talk about why it was so effective, what kind of coordination and organization goes into these events. We're going to talk about all that. It's going to be a big content-heavy episode. So I'm just getting everything ready here. Brace yourselves. It's going to be a content-heavy one. There's a lot to talk about, and who knows, maybe in this episode I'll say everything that I have amassed, all the research that I've put together about Israel, and then I'm thinking about moving on from, to other topics, but we'll see how it goes. Other things have happened already with the main shooter. We've got things going on, and there's probably going to be an invasion. Israel's prime minister already said that there will be a ground invasion. Everyone's anticipating a ground invasion into the Gaza Strip. So it seems like this is going to keep developing. So I wanted to make sure I present everything I have. So this episode will be about that. It's going to be about coordination, organization, and the purpose, like the game plan of the war in Israel. Not just the purpose on the ostensible two sides, Israel and Hamas. I'm talking about the global purpose, the purpose of different interests that are standing behind those two countries. Because as I've mentioned, the Israel-Hamas war is a war between two terrorist organizations, Hamas and Israel. These are terrorist organizations, and you know where I come from. All governments are terrorist organizations. So as we go into this, the Israel-Hamas war, just so everybody knows, at this point, October 28th, what is the current state of the Israel-Hamas war? Following the original October 7th attacks, there has been total siege and bombing of Gaza. What is siege? It means that Israel has basically blockaded Gaza. It was already blockaded. It was already a concentration camp and an open-air prison. But now Israel is blocking off food, medicine, supplies. There's no power in the Gaza Strip. So essentially, that is the reality if you're living there. You don't have clean water, you don't have food, you don't have anything. And on top of that, there's also bombing of allegedly Hamas strongholds, strong points, key points. But essentially, you have to you have to look above the terminology whenever there's a war where one of the sides is painted as terrorists. When it's a war between two countries, okay, there's either you're bombing a military base or you're bombing a hospital, which you don't do. You're bombing a school, which you don't do. But whenever it's a war against a side where they're fighting against terrorists, now the rules of engagement are changed as far as the public thinks, right? So they could bomb a civilian building and then call it a terrorist stronghold, when in reality what they did is bomb an apartment building or a school and so on and so forth. Um, this is why in the last 100 years the word terrorist has become used so much. The word terrorist is a catch-all, a justification to basically do indiscriminate killing in other territories, right? So that's the current state of the war. That's what's going on right now. There's bombing going on. There are horrific videos coming out where we could see the effects. It seems as this is what war is going to be like in the 21st century. Everyone has a phone, even in these isolated areas of the world like the Gaza Strip. Everybody has access to the internet, so we're going to see what's going on, and we can see. And I'll play some of those videos in this episode. So it's total siege and bombing ahead of an expected ground invasion. There's going to be an invasion at some point. So first, I'm going to go into the organization and planning necessary for that original Hamas attack and invasion to have taken place the way it did. The death toll varies. They're saying about 1,400 to 2,000 Israelis were killed originally when the music festival was attacked on October 7th, and then the basically flood of Hamas members, and then indiscriminate killing of civilians. If that had not taken place, we are not where we are today, where there's an expected invasion of Gaza, and the world is okay with it, right? Because this is really the thing. It's about public support, and the public support for an invasion of Gaza was not there before. Now this attack occurred, this Hamas invasion, this Hamas terrorist acts, these acts occurred, and now the public support, the global support is there for an invasion of the Gaza Strip and possible further conflict and escalation in the Middle East. Now the public support is there as a result of what? As a result of these attacks. So we're going to talk about these attacks. We're going to talk about the organization and planning that was necessary for it to go down like this, because I'm going to make the claim of false flag. That's what we're talking about. There was planning from outside. There was coordination on all levels. There had to be coordination on all levels. Now, I don't mean that there was a whole plan and orders came down from some central point, because it didn't have to go down like that. But this is the reality of false flags in the 21st century. When you have a religious extremist group like Hamas, you can very much control them. Puppets on a string, you could control them. But you don't have to be in charge of all of their actions, because you have the psychological profile of the group and you know how they're going to act in a set way. So you only need certain key controlling members, certain key influences in key positions, and the pyramid is held up and the false flag events turn out exactly as they should. Now, they're already calling this the new Israel's 9/11. They're calling this the new Pearl Harbor. And I'm referring specifically to when they first breached the wall, right? The Hamas terrorists from the Gaza Strip, they breached the wall and they started killing civilians. They overran Israel's border defenses. So this is Israel's 9/11, right? And just like our 9/11, September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center, you cannot put it on incompetence. It couldn't just be incompetence. Israel is one of the most technologically advanced military and intelligence forces of the world. The IDF is advanced. They're well trained. right? This is a high-tech military. And if those defense programs that they had in place did not work, it's because they were intended not to work. It's not incompetence, it's malicious negligence. And I'll talk about all of the defense measures that failed. And then I'll talk about historically the ones that failed, because you have to just say it the way it is. Every member of the Israeli, at least the ruling authority, they are an accomplice to murder and genocide. And that's just the reality. Because there were defense measures in place, and then I'll show the videos of how it happened. I'll talk about historical examples of how it happened. The reality is, when it came down, they just did not do their job. But I bet if somebody tried to do this, if some freelance group tried to do this the way Hamas did it, and they had the same military capability, and they did it on the day it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't have worked out the way it did. There was coordination here, there was coordination on all levels, and that means there was coordination on the Israel side. So 2 weeks ago, I talked about the historical background for atrocity propaganda, and I talked about this. I talked about how the atrocities and the horrible beheadings and all of the violence against women and children, this stuff is being stressed, and that creates public support for an invasion, right? So I talked about all the historical examples of how that's been used and how that's been used to justify war. Well, now I'm going to talk about historical examples of false flags. False flags or military operations that make it seem like an act was done, either an act of killing civilians or a military act, or some kind of big event was done, usually a terrorist attack or something like that, a manufactured event like that, so that the alleged the victim, the party that had the violence done to them, now has a motive to take revenge and take action, take retribution, take retributive measures. Okay, so historical false flags. Let's start with World War I, and I talked about babes on bayonets in Belgium when the Germans were crossing Belgium towards France. How they were showing now all over the world. They had magazines with the cartoons of babies on bayonets that basically made the Germans seem like they were barbarians, that they were just slaughtering children and raping women going through Belgium. So not only did that happen, it was about the Belgium atrocities, but also you had the sinking of the Lusitania. Now the Lusitania was a British merchant ship, right, during World War I, and it was a ship that was sent out while Germany had a blockade of Great Britain, right, of England, and that ship was sent out knowing that it would be sunk by the Germans. It was carrying weapons and ammunition, and it had over 120 U.S. citizens on board. So what the sinking of the Lusitania was about was getting the U.S. into World War I, because at this point, the U.S. was not in World War I, they were practicing isolationism, and there was no public support for World War I. For the U.S. going into World War I, and that was the sinking of the Lusitania. It's not even that it affected the English so much because they were already at war. It affected the United States because of all those Americans on the ship, and basically, it was such a huge event. It was such a barbaric thing to sink a ship that wasn't a military ship, and they killed all those Americans, and it worked. And the sinking of the Lusitania worked. It's still debatable who did it, why did they do it, but essentially it was a sure thing that this thing was going to sink, and they sent it out there anyway, and they used it, and it did change. It swayed public opinion very much so. And if you look into this, if you research the sinking of the Lusitania, there's very compelling arguments to be made, and it goes deep, of course, but I'm not gonna settle in on this. I'm gonna move on because there are so many more examples and examples that I have better research and more compelling evidence on. So I'm going to go straight into the next one, and the next historical false flag that allowed for a totalitarian takeover, which is what this is with Israel and Hamas. No matter how it turns out, any war in the Middle East right now, any war between Israel and Palestine, is going to result in an Israel victory, and it's going to result in a more totalitarian controlled Middle East. Not only by the party that will be victorious, which is Israel. Guys, like, Israel's not going to lose. Like, the outcome is a sure thing. And they've just created the public support to bring a heavy hand and a fist down on the occupied Gaza Strip and West Bank. That's what's going on. It's just, this allowed them, the actions of Hamas allow this to occur. So it's going to be totalitarian rule on the western side, right, Israel, and then also on the Islamic side, the pro-Palestinian side, it's going to be more totalitarian on that side, but it's going to be what? Religious Islamicist, Sharia law, Eastern totalitarianism, which is religious control, right? Religious control of patriarchy. And on this side, it's going to be international socialism, and which is communism. And communism is the end goal of all these governments. That's what's going to happen, right? That the jihad will not be successful. What's going to occur at the end of this journey is going to be international socialism, which is total technological, medical, technocratic communism. That has been the plan for hundreds and hundreds of years and before, and this is just how it's going down. But people cannot differentiate that, which is why I'm here doing my show about this and going off track a little bit, because I want to clearly delineate, break down the different parties, and also integrate it, bring it all together, so that you, the viewer, can see how they're trying to play you, how they're trying to sway your view of things, how they're trying to blur your vision of history, and also and confuse you on what is really going on in the world today, and therefore confuse you on what your work is to do. Because that's what this is about. This is not about really Israel versus Hamas. This is not really about what happens there. This is about you, through knowing this, through looking at this correctly, knowing where the real enemy is and what our work is to do to ensure that this does not happen to us and our children. That is the whole point. So I talked about the sinking of the Lusitania, World War I. Now World War II, I always talk about it. I talk about it, seems like every episode, and it's in the beginning, it's in my intro, that building is the burning of the Reichstag that's on fire. The Reichstag is like the German Congress or the English Parliament, right? It's the legislative building. And it burned down in 1932, in 1933 actually. It was set on fire. So this is obviously before World War II, but this is still before Adolf Hitler had dictatorial powers. So he was still just like a political leader of a political party, but there are of course competing parties, right? So, and they just had an election in 1932. They had an election in November, just like we do. And the Nazi party still won, but their support fell by 4%. There was actually a communist party that was kind of rising up at the time, and other parties. It's not just a two-party system like it is with us in Europe. In those countries, you have, there are a lot more parties. So that went down. The Nazis were still in power, but their power was dwindling and not rising. So Adolf Hitler was sworn in as Chancellor, which is like the president or the leader, on January 30th, right, 1933. So 4 weeks after that, you had this fire, the burning of the Reichstag, 2/27, 1933. And it's essentially come out that the Nazis set this fire. This is like historically, by credible historians, they'll just say this. People know that Adolf Hitler started this fire. Other historians won't say that happened, and you know why? It's because it hits a little bit too close to home. It's just a bit too recent, and it's just a bit too glaring of an example of government lies and government attacks on its own people. Even though it's Hitler and the Nazi Party, they don't want to they don't want to publicly speak too loudly about the burning of the Reichstag being a government operation, because then you got to look at the Kennedy assassination, and then you got to look at 9/11, and then look at that too. So they don't want to set that mental precedent, and that's why you don't hear about the burning of the Reichstag. But they did that. They did that, and what happened right afterwards? They passed the Enabling Act. So essentially what they did, just a couple days after, Adolf Hitler got a law through that enabled him to pass any law without the legislative branch. So at that point, he basically becomes the dictator. And it's come out later, four of the officers that, that responded to the fire, the day of the fire, they've actually come out and testified in Germany, officially testified that they took the guy that started the fire there. He was a patsy, and they took him there. He started the fire. He was a Dutch communist, actually. So they basically came out and admitted that, right? And it's obvious that this was done on purpose. Hitler himself said it was like a sign from God that Nazism was the answer, and that they had to, lock the country down, and that's what they did, and the people went for it. Because of what? Because of fire, burning, chaos. This is how it goes, and this is what's going on in Israel today, again. Walter Gemp, he was the head of the Berlin Fire Department on the day that the Reichstag fire happened, and he was in charge of the response to the incident, and he actually was dismissed for presenting evidence that suggested that the Nazis were involved in the fire. So he actually spoke up about this, right? He asserted that there had been a delay in notifying the fire brigade, and that he had been forbidden from making full use of the resources at his disposal. And in 1937, Gemp was arrested for the abuse of office. So right after this happened, in the next month, he was actually removed from his post, like he was dismissed, because he was saying, hey, the Nazi Party did this. This is before this is before Hitler became the Führer, right? So they still think they're in a democracy at this point, or a republic. And he's basically saying, hey, these guys didn't let me, prevent this fire from happening. And he was arrested in 1937, a couple years later. Dictatorial power now, right? And despite his appeal, he was in prison, of course. And then he was strangled and killed in prison on May 2nd, 1939, right before the invasion of Poland and the start of World War II. So clearly he was persecuted, arrested, and killed because he told the truth. And that happened simple and plain. The burning of the Reichstag is an ideal, perfect example of a false flag and how it works. And it worked. These things worked, and that's why you see it happening today with the way Hamas was just able to execute this attack perfectly. I'll get to that. Now, that's on the European side, right? What about over here? What happened over here in World War II? We had Pearl Harbor, right? They're already calling this the new Pearl Harbor, as I've mentioned. So what I'm about to read and show is from, before I go into that, what is the false flag with Pearl Harbor? Well, of course, before this, the United States did not enter World War II. And clearly, the foreign interest, the international interest, right? Because it's not just about the United States. It's not Eisenhower or Lyndon B. Johnson or Woodrow Wilson that want to go into wars. It is the interests behind them, right? This is a plan for international socialism, a collectivism agenda, a Satanist agenda, and this is why we have wars, and this is why these big superpowers like the United States especially, they're always pushed to join wars, and there is a big push and an influence. There are big incentives for getting these big world superpowers into wars. So that's what they wanted to do, and that's why Pearl Harbor happened, and that's why This is another example of a huge, well-coordinated, huge military operation against the most technologically advanced, the most capable military of the time. It was perpetrated against them. It worked to perfection. Pearl Harbor was devastating. Uh, so much, so much death, so much destruction. Such a tragedy occurred, and nobody stopped them. Now, how did that occur? And this brings me to what I'm about to read. This is from the Proceedings of the Army Pearl Harbor Board. This is a sworn testimony, a military testimony of Joseph McDonald, technician 4th class. He was the communications man. He was operating at the switchboard of a radar. They actually had a radar. Before this, radar, it was a new thing at the time. So they actually did have the radar developed, and they saw, of course, this whole fleet, because the way Pearl Harbor happened is you had a fleet of Japanese ships, and then the planes would take off from the Japanese ships, the aircraft carriers, and those ships then attacked the American ships, as well as the Japanese ships attacked the ships that brought the planes. So they would have seen on this radar a huge fleet, and then the actual planes that were already in the air. So why didn't nobody see that? What went down with that? Well, this testimony talks about it. This is his statement. The whole transcript of this is available. He says, the clock was right behind me in the next room. It was in the corner, and I turned around to time the message, and I saw Lieutenant Tyler, and he was sitting there at the plotting table. He was supposed to go off duty at 8 o'clock, and he was just sitting there. Everybody went home, and this was the first day we had off in over a month. So the guys went home about 7 o'clock. I mean the plotters. They worked all along for a month there. They were working from 4 o'clock in the morning all the way through to dusk. And December 7th was the first day they got off in the month. So Pearl Harbor happened December 7th in the morning, just after 7 o'clock. And, this guy who was there, who was working the switchboard, is saying that everybody worked 14 hours plus for a month straight, no days off. And December 7th was the first day they got off in about a month. And the reason I say that and I stress that first is because think about that. Think about how perfect of a scenario that is, and ask yourself if it's really a coincidence. And Lieutenant Tyler, he will come up again, but I'll just say right away, this was Lieutenant Tyler was the guy basically in charge at the time. So this is the guy, he was warned about what they saw on the radar, and it was Lieutenant Tyler's second day on the job. He didn't even know, and the testimony will show that he was not competent, he was not ready, he should not have been there. But he was there. This is the guy that was in charge, and everybody else. This is during shift change, right? This is between the 4 and 8 o'clock period, and everybody's getting off at 7 because it's the first day out they're getting in about a month. He continues the testimony. Well, when I received the call, wrote it down, and I brought it up to the lieutenant, I am not quite sure whether I read it to him or handed it. I think I read it to him. Anyway, the lieutenant looked at it afterwards, and I expressed that it was the first time I had ever received anything like this. I said, do you think we ought to do anything about it? So I wanted to call back the plotters. I mean, they didn't have much practice there all along. And when this fellow called in, he expressed it to be an awful big flight. It was a massive flight. He's talking about when he received the call and wrote it down. He's talking about writing down the position of the planes, how many planes there are, right? This is the message. And he wants to call, not just, he's talking about he wants to call back the plotters and basically like, hey, shouldn't we do something? Like, this is a large group of planes on the radar, like what's going on? So then General Frank, I don't know what his first name is, but he responds to him. He says, tell us what the message was. So McDonald says, a large number of planes coming in from the north, 3 points east. And he really expressed he really expressed something. So after I told the lieutenant, he didn't say nothing. So I went back to the telephone and I talked to the man on the unit again. It says, and he just repeated the message, and I went in and I told the lieutenant again. I said, "Sir, I would appreciate it very much if you would answer the phone." And after he was finished with his conversation, then General Frank interrupts. He's saying he answered the telephone, and then McDonald replies, "Yes, sir." After he was finished with his conversation, I asked him, "What do you think it is?" And he said, "It's nothing." And this is what this Lieutenant Tyler says. He said it's nothing, right? No urgency at all. This guy's scrambling to try to, figure out what's going on, and he's just saying it's nothing. Second day on the job, this guy, in charge of the radar at Pearl Harbor. Giant flight of a bunch of planes. It's nothing. Then the general asked, as a matter of fact, this Lieutenant Tyler who was in there, was he in there for instruction? Was he not? Because instruction, like he was training. It's the second day, he's in there for training. And McDonald replies, "I think he was, sir. I only saw him around there. I think that was about the second time I saw him. I knew he didn't understand because he was, well, all those lieutenants just come down there and they just learn by looking at the men working. Right? He was like a company guy. He was incompetent. He didn't really know how to do this job. But he was there in charge, right? And then General Frank points out that it wasn't even McDonald's assigned duty to call these things to their attention, but just to man the switchboard, right? So McDonald wasn't even supposed to be where he was, right? He just noticed it, and then he, being a competent person, he's saying, "Hey, like, what is this? What should we do about it?" So McDonald says, "I don't know, sir. I just commented. That's what anybody would do." Correct. That's what anybody would do who's not part of a stand-down operation or who's not following orders to make sure that no alarm is raised. That's what any normal person would do. Okay? He's talking about how he expressed that I've never seen anything like this before. McDonald has been in there since the night before at 5 o'clock. So he's working the whole night, right? And this is at the end of his shift, right? So think about it, like 14 hours, and you've been working 14 hours straight for a month. You're sleep deprived, you're tired, and something like this occurs, right? It's no wonder that it occurred at a time like this, because it was at a time where it was going to be easy to get something like this past defenses. And then the Lieutenant Tyler, this General Russell comments, and the lieutenant had been in there all that time with you, right? And McDonald says, no, sir. He came on at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And so they asked him, the general asked him, like, normally when you get messages over the telephone, didn't you have somebody up there to put them on a board of some sort? Or basically he's asking, what's the usual procedure, right, at this time? He's asking, was there always an officer there after 4 o'clock in the morning? And he's saying no, that usually they came on about 7:30 or 8 o'clock because it's shift change. So this time between 4 and 8 is where there's a vulnerability. And now, the Japanese wouldn't know that, but they just happened to perform the attack right then and there. So then they're asking about who are the people. He's pointing that out, right? On this particular morning, the information center had been manned. There had been some people up there to run it from 4 to 7. Had there not? McDonald says, yes, sir. How many? I judged there were about 15. And they went off about what time? They went off at 7. So everybody left at 7. Right? But these guys are just getting in. He's asking him, how was he there? Everybody left at 7, but this guy, Joseph McDonald, he stayed. And he's explaining why he stayed. Well, I was on duty until 7:30, and you see it was Sunday morning, and they didn't eat. My relief didn't eat breakfast until about 7 or 7:15, so I had to wait until 7:30. And all those people had left, and he happened to stay, and the only person who was there was Lieutenant Tyler. So then he asks him, okay, so for those, how long have you been working in the center? And McDonald says about 4 months. So they ask him, well, those other soldiers, like, are you working with the same people for those 4 months? He basically says yes. Same crew, we're always there for those 4 months. He's saying yes, sir. Most of there were trained men. Uh, so then the general asks him. He points out this inconsistency. He says, "Now you say that you did not have a day off. I do not know whether that got on the record. What you meant about that or not? Was everybody going to quit that day, Sunday, December 7th?" So he's saying, did everybody leave their shift and basically have a day off? All those people that were working. And Mr. McDonald says, no, they didn't have to pull their shift. I mean, they pull it until 7 o'clock in the morning, and then they would have the rest of the day off on Sunday. But all the other days, they stayed on after 7 o'clock. They all did? He's asking the questions. Did they all stay past 7? And, McDonald says, yes, sir. And then Colonel Toulmin asks him, what was the reason, Sergeant, for their getting off on that particular day? And this is the smoking gun right here. This is where Joseph McDonald says it. He said, I could not understand it, sir. It just happened to be unlucky, I guess. And that's how it turned out. So there was a reason. Clearly there was a reason. It was coordinated this way for them to be working that whole month, to all get that day off, and for the attack to happen Sunday morning. And the only person that was supposed to be there manning the radar was that Lieutenant Tyler. And it was his second day on the job. He may not even have known, but he was placed in a position where his incompetence was going to result in no action being taken. And that's not hard to do. This Joseph McDonald, he almost stopped Pearl Harbor. One alert man almost stopped it. But the reason he wasn't able to stop it is because of the military hierarchy and chain of command. This kind of Lieutenant Tyler is just going to say it's nothing, and that's it. What are you going to do? You're not going to jump rank. You're not going to jump the chain of command. And this is why false flags are carried out by military organizations. Because of the compartmentalization there. And the way you can just work those people to death, 14-hour shifts a month straight. That's going to make them sluggish mentally, right? So that was World War II. That was Pearl Harbor. Now, we're just getting started in this episode. Now, in 1954, the Lavon Affair. The Lavon Affair was actually an Israeli false flag, an Israeli operation. So it's interesting. It was codenamed Operation Susanna, conducted in the summer of 1954, conducted in Egypt, right? So the operation was, at the time, Egypt was like imperialistic, so Egypt was like a military country, and there was a conflict with Israel. Now, what was protecting Israel at the time was that the British Navy was in the Suez Canal, so that was ensuring that Egypt would not move in on Israel, right? So as part of, and of course it was known at the time that the British were about to withdraw from the Suez Canal, and then Egypt would be free to, take resources or expand or go to war with Israel or whatever. So this was part of the false flag operation, an official government operation, covert but official. And it was a group of Egyptian Jews. They were recruited by Israel military intelligence to plant bombs inside Egyptian, American, and British-owned civilian targets. Not military targets, like civilian targets. So cinemas, libraries, and American educational centers. The bombs were timed to detonate several hours after closing time, and the attacks were to be blamed on the Muslim Brotherhood. That's interesting because the Muslim Brotherhood is the linear predecessor of Hamas. This is what Hamas comes from. It comes from the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay? And this false flag attack that Israel, the government of Israel, did in 1954, this is 70 years ago. Right? This is not that long ago. They did this plan. The Israeli government operatives did this, and they blamed it on the Muslim Brotherhood. So this is like them doing some type of operation and then blaming it on Hamas. Now, is that kind of not what I'm talking about here? So back to the Lavon affair. You could research the Lavon affair. It's come out. This is like open, clear knowledge, not conspiracy stuff, not conjecture. This is factual knowledge. And I know it's going to be a long episode, but I wanted to get that knowledge on the record. I wanted to get that proof on the record for anybody researching this in the future. You could go back to this, and I'm going to lay it out step by step what happened here, and I'm going to give proof of the level of organization that took place here in October in Israel. So these attacks were to be blamed on the Muslim Brotherhood, also on Egyptian communists, on specified malcontents, local nationalists, blamed on all these groups, right? With the aim of creating a climate of sufficient violence and instability to induce the British government to retain its occupying troops in Egypt's Suez Canal zone, right? That was the whole plan. Now, nobody died, right? But four of those government operatives did die. 2 of them committed suicide after being captured, and 2 of them were executed by Egyptian authorities. So they were arrested in Egypt and basically sentenced to death, right? These people that bombed these places. Now, nobody was killed in these bombings. It was just for the shock value. And Israel publicly denied any involvement in the incident until 2005, when the surviving agents were awarded certificates of appreciation by Israeli President Moshe Katsav. So, 50 years, 51 years, denied it, right? Israel denied that this happened. 51 years later, these spies, these government spies who planted these bombs, they were basically honored by the Israeli president. And this is like, you could look this up on Wikipedia. You could look up, there have been books written about this, and it's a very embarrassing thing for Israelis. Like, they know about this. This happened. This is an actual false flag that happened about blowing something up, blaming it on Muslims, and then using that for some type of particular goal. Now, what is this called when you cause some type of damage, when you blow something up, and then you use that to get some kind of political aim accomplished? That's called terrorism. That's called terrorism, and that's why I say that Israel and Israel's defense force against Hamas and the Muslim extremist groups, these are wars between 2 terrorist organizations. It's terrorists against terrorists, and on both sides you've got innocent lives being lost. So don't talk about this is some type of war between 2 countries or some type of conflict between 2 people. It is not that. That's why I'm making this episode, because it really gets on my nerves when people talk about this shit. They pick a side, they talk about this shit like it's a fucking game. It's not a fucking game. Okay? So then you've got the next example. You got Cuba in the 1960s. This is Operation Northwoods, and I'm going to display the Northwoods document. This is it. This is from 1962. This is an American military operation, a proposed operation. It says top secret. It's not top secret anymore. This is an actual government document, and this was a proposal of different things that could be done that would give the United States the reason to invade Cuba and go to war with Cuba. That they wanted to go to war with Cuba at the time, but there was not the public support for it. So Operation Northwoods, the Northwoods document, was basically an outlining of what could be done to basically fake it, to fake events, so that the reason would be there, so that they would have justification for war with Cuba. And these are direct quotes. It's a description of pretext which would provide a justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. So right there in black and white, government document, 60 years ago, talking about doing, carrying out false flags. Official document, right? And this is official. This is like a level of official. Like, yes, it's covert military operations, but this is like on an actual document, and this is actually done by people who, took oath and like swore oaths to the flag. We're not even talking about the deep dark stuff, right? We're not even talking about the real operations that are never written, and they never get a logo or a signature. They're just people talking at a table, right? We're not even talking about the real chess players of the world. This is just surface level stuff. And you could see another one of the quotes at the end. It is recommended that this responsibility for both overt and covert military operations be assigned to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is the Joint Chiefs of Staff that wrote this document. So the reason I put that there is to just know that the term covert military operations is not just something that you hear on YouTube videos. Covert military operations are taking place all the time. So when you see babies being beheaded, when you see bombs being dropped, don't just assume that it's who they tell you it is. Don't assume that it's crazy cult members. Well, it is crazy cult members, but you see that on these documents, they call crazy cult members covert military operations. That's what I'm saying. And then our final historical false flag is the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The Gulf of Tonkin incident happened on August 2nd and August 4th of 1964. So this is the Vietnam War. This is the thing that paved the way for direct military involvement by the United States in Vietnam. Without this, you don't have an invasion of Vietnam. Without this false flag, those Vietnam vets that you know that have PTSD, they never get the PTSD. They never see the traps. They never see the foxholes. This is what allowed them to do it, right? And it was as a result of government. And now, government, of course, does not hide that this happened, but they say that it was a mistake. They claim incompetence. And I hope I'm outlining very clearly that it's not incompetence. It is malicious negligence disguised as incompetence, right? In some cases. So what the Gulf of Tonkin was, is there were military ships in the water near Vietnam, but they were not at war at this time, but basically they had an incident where they fired on them, right? They were close to each other, so obviously the American ship fires warning shots. But firing warning shots, of course, is still firing shots. So then the Vietnamese military engaged them in return, and basically you just had a ship being damaged. No Americans died in this. There was one bullet hole in the ship. Right, but this is what happened. Originally, U.S. military claims blamed North Vietnam for the confrontation, and the ostensible, but in fact imaginary incident happened on August 4th. So on August 2nd, the actual event happened. They were just firing at each other. Nobody actually died on the American side. But then they said that on August 4th, there was another interaction, and that one was deadly and brutal, right? But later investigation revealed that the second attack never happened. The official American claim is that it was based mostly on erroneously interpreted communications intercepts. The National Security Agency, NSA, a subsidiary of the U.S. Defense Department, deliberately skewed intelligence to create the impression that an attack had been carried out. So an attack had not been carried out, and the NSA did what they said, deliberately skewed intelligence. They lied and put out propaganda, right? They skewed the data, they lied, they put out propaganda. They lied about an attack happening when it never really happened. But it was in all the news the day after, right? While doubts regarding the perceived second attack have been expressed since 1964, it was not until years later that it was shown conclusively to never have happened. In the 2003 documentary, The Fog of War, the former United States Secretary of Defense, Robert S. McNamara, admitted that the supposed August 4th attack for which Washington authorized retaliation never happened. So the Secretary of Defense admitted it, but when? Not until 2003. So 40 years later, are you seeing a pattern? 60 years later, 50 years later, 40 years later, that's when it comes out that a false flag attack occurred. So when you talk about the Kennedy assassination, this is like around the time it should be coming out. Now with that, you see there was There was a bit about that, but it's not official. It may never become official or become common knowledge what happened during the Kennedy assassination. When you talk about September 11th, apply that. It may not be till 2040 or 2050 or 2060 that it really starts to come out what really happened that day. So you have to have a historical background and see when these big events take place, what is it really about, and what is the most likely, the outcome, that has a historical precedent for going down the way it did, right? As a result of his testimony on August 7th, Congress passed a joint resolution titled the Southeast Asia Resolution, which granted Lyndon B. Johnson, the president at the time, granted him the authority to conduct military operations in Southeast Asia without the benefit of a declaration of war. So thanks to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, 3 days later, they pass a law that gives the president a right to basically go to war without officially going to war. This is just like after they burned the Reichstag, Hitler passes the Enabling Act, and now, because he's the leader, he can make laws without Congress. So he can pass laws without actually passing the laws. The president, he could go to war without actually going to war. This is what these false flags allow government to do. They allow them to take emergency powers. Anytime you have chaos and they claim emergency, you should assume that is a plot by criminals and by terrorists. You should assume that terrorism is being utilized against you, because time and time again it proves conclusively to be the case. It just doesn't come out for 50 years. And on March 8th, 1965, 7 months later, 3,500 U.S. Marines landed near Da Nang, South Vietnam, and this marked the beginning of the American Ground War. And at this time, U.S. public opinion overwhelmingly supported the deployment. And that's what it does. 7 months later, you got an invasion of Vietnam because of the Gulf of Tonkin. And of course, the propaganda was applied, and public opinion was swayed. So here are your examples. The sinking of the Lusitania, Reichstag fire, Pearl Harbor, then the Lavon affair in the 50s in Israel, Operation Northwoods, Gulf of Tonkin incident. Those are just your false flags for which there's the most historical proof in the last 100 years. They've happened before, and they'll keep happening, and there are some I'm not mentioning. This is just good ammunition to have in your in your department, in your mind, for when you bring this to people, right? Because we can get too easily out-argued by fake data, by propaganda and all of this, by people who want to take some side. They're emotionally involved in supporting one side of a war. They're not talking about the causes of war. Why is there war going on in the world? And how do we actually solve this? How do we actually obtain what is called peace? The only way you obtain peace is by being in a position of independence, in a position of power, individual power, independence, individuality, and knowledge, and ability to defend your personal rights. Okay, that is the only way peace is achieved in the world. War always benefits one of two involved governments, sometimes both, right? So in this case, war benefits Israel. It just does. Sometimes it benefits both parties. In this case, it actually benefits both. The war benefits Hamas, because what they've done here with the siege of Gaza is that every man, woman, and child who's not a member of Hamas, one of the over 2 million people living in the Gaza Strip, they don't have food or water right now. So what does that de facto turn them into? De facto military combatants. They've created 2 million terrorists. I don't even like to say that, because there are people who are dying. There are people who are starving and dying right now. They never asked for this, but you've got one group of people bombing their hospitals, You've got another group who are saying, Sharia law and jihad, but they at least claim to be for their liberation. So who do you think they're going to support? They're not just going to sit there and do nothing while they starve to death, while you blockade humanitarian aid from around the world. So what do you think is going to happen? So it benefits both parties, this war, unfortunately. So it always benefits one of the two governments, any kind of war, any kind. And it always results in the suffering, death, and economic decline of the people of both sides. Both sides suffer in war because somebody has to pay for that increased production, increased level of activity. It costs so much money. And I didn't mention at the time, but if you look, I actually have this on one of my earlier episodes. If you look at the amount of taxes taken from Americans over the past 150 years, it's like this. It slowly goes up. How much taxes we pay. World War I, it goes up massively. In World War II, it skyrockets again. Major wars, this is what allows for greater taxation, and they never really come down. They come down slightly, but then they just go back up again. So this is what war is. War is a tool by tyrants to bring in their collectivism, their totalitarianism, and the ultimate plan, which is ostensibly it's international socialism, which is communism. This is on the light side. This is what the plan is, and the real plan is a system of slavery and cannibalism and torture and eugenics. Is really the plan under the economic and political system of communism. That's the plan. That's always been the plan, guys. And you need to have this historical background to know what kind of world you're living in, because it's not what they're telling you on the news, and it's not what Tucker Carlson is telling you either. It's not what your favorite podcaster is telling you either. There are a couple of us. This is why I became one of them. Because this is not really out there. No flag is your ally. No flag, no oath, no national anthem. They all participate in this. All governments. This is the only way we can really end war. It is about a renouncing of membership of any organizations, because all organizations at some point they become at some point they have an inside man, and they fit into this global hierarchy, this structure that perpetuates this war and violence, generation after generation. The only way we can be free from this is to uplift ourselves as individuals, become aware of our individual rights, and make the effort to really stand up for ourselves and build interpersonal relationships. But that's it, not under an organization. Every man, woman, and child is the owner of himself and his rightfully earned property only. That's it. So, senseless violence creates the public support for war. This is the way it goes, and this is what's going on in Israel today. Now, before we get into the military strategic analysis, which is what I'm doing, this is already an hour-long video, I just want to give a quick breakdown of the military capabilities we got. So, Hamas has 25,000 fighters maximum. 25,000 people. IDF, the Israel Army, the Israel Defense Force, has 170,000 active duty soldiers right now. Well trained, well equipped. 170,000 to 25,000. Now the IDF has 450,000 reserves that they could call in at any point, and they have called them back. You've got a whole army coming to Israel now. Now think about that. Does that help Israel or no? They've got an army of 500,000 people now. They're already one of the top militaries in the world by just the amount of people they have. And now in that small area, they're calling the reserves from all over the world. So right now, a large percentage of that is already in Israel and ready to fight. The Israel police, there are 35,000 Israeli policemen. So the Israeli police itself outnumbers Hamas. right? So I'm painting a picture here, and 6,000 of those, 600,000, 6,000 of those Israeli policemen are Magav, which is a special unit that's military equipped and specially trained. They're like the Delta Force of cops in the Israeli police. So they're real specialists, 6,000 of them. And then you got 25,000 maximum Hamas, which is mostly guys who they have some kind of equipment, they have some kind of funding, but these guys are not military trained. They're sticks and stones type of guys, And I'll show some of the videos. You can see how well trained they are. They've been eating a lot of kebabs, and you can see these guys. They're not military trained, but I bring that up to just keep in mind as I go through the organization level of this attack, how much of a military presence there is in Israel. So for this to go down and work so perfectly, it's just like the thing I would like you to keep in the back of your mind is like, okay, where is all the military? Where are all the cops? Where is the military response of Israel? And that's just the manpower, right? The manpower, they outnumber them more than 5-1. They outnumber them 10-1. And they have better technology than them and better training. And they're supposed to outnumber Hamas 10-1. Assuming every member of Hamas made it and was in Israel, past the defenses, which is not what occurred. But even if that happened, they would be outnumbered 10-1. How does that happen? Right? So we'll talk about what kind of level of organization and planning and coordination would create such an environment for them to be so successful. They breached the barrier. The Gaza wall is a $2.8 billion wall. And this is what it looks like. They have an observation tower on the Israeli side. They've got a double-sided big fence. Big fences, I'll show it. And the observation tower, you've got trained marksmen on top, and they have a zone up to 1,000 meters where they'll see you, because in these areas it's just flat land, so they see you, and nobody can even approach that wall. If they do, obviously the alarm goes up, and then you would just be shot. So keep that in mind. And even behind the observation towers, there are these big sand barriers, so that people can't just penetrate it. On top of that, right? And under the fence, there's a concrete wall, so that they can't get through the tunnels. And here, they didn't get through the tunnels. They broke through the fence. One of the most high-tech wall in the world. They broke through it, and I'll talk about how they broke through it. So you can see how ridiculous it is to assume that this happened without coordination, and I mean coordination with the Israeli side. Right? That's what I'm talking about. So this thing includes a 7-meter wall with sensors, remote control machine guns, and barbed wire in 3 areas where the border runs adjacent to Israeli settlements. Remote control machine guns. I forgot to put this in here, but I found a video of the Israeli military showing off the remote controlled guns. The kind of technology they have on this fence is ridiculous. But overall, the first barrier is a barbed wire fence without sensors, and the other one, the next one, is 20 meters off, and it consists of a road and a fence with sensors. And these existed before 2005. And then there's another element added to it. That's a buffer zone, codenamed Hoover's B, which with motion sensors in the ground, surrounded by a new sensor-equipped fence with watchtowers every 2 kilometers, equipped with the remote control machine guns instead of soldiers, right? So they even have remote controlled guns just in case there are snipers, so they don't have just guys in towers. And the border is controlled both from the air and on the ground. That's how high-tech this is. This is, I'll read and show a little bit from a Washington Post article that's supposed to explain this, how Hamas breached Israel's Iron Wall. So first, I'm just going to take a drink real quick. And I'll tell you all about how they breached it. Over an hour already. Let's go. So first, drones dropped explosives, right? Using commercial drones, Hamas bombed Israeli observation towers. So these guys basically, they're supposed to take like Amazon drones and just drop bombs perfectly into the observation towers without raising alarm, without being intercepted by the marksman at the top. So this is the claim, right? That's what they did. Then you had coordinated rocket fire and manpower. Now, there was rocket fire. I'm not saying these things didn't happen. I'm just saying how crazy it is for it to have gone down that well. Okay? They started firing rockets, and then you had actual people on paragliders, hang gliders, right, to get over the fence. Of course, they did this at the same time. The rockets, when they do this, the rockets would trigger Israel's Iron Dome system. I haven't even mentioned that. They have a basic military system that intercepts any kind of rocket fire, any kind of bombs or flying aircraft gets intercepted by like a high-tech system. That's what Israel has. And I won't talk about it in this episode. I'll have to do another one because it's taking too long. But they want to turn the Iron Dome into an iron beam. They're going to have a laser. This is going to be used to bring in the laser, actually, that basically like a science fiction type thermal laser that will just shoot anything from the sky. And this is going to happen as a result of this, right? So then they fly over with their paragliders, and at the same time they have explosives along the fence, and then they blew a hole in the fence, and then you had the people on motorbikes and the armored cars going through the gaps in the fence. And that to actually happen, for that to actually happen, they needed to have a bulldozer to knock the fence over, because as you could see, this is a pretty good fence. This is a well-constructed thing. Like you don't just take some wire cutters here, right? But then to get a bulldozer this close, remember there's a 1,000-meter risk zone, an observation area. So if there was a bulldozer even close to the fence on the Gaza side, that would have raised alarm. That doesn't just happen. And I'm not sure if I included this here, but it would take like weeks and months to bring the bulldozer closer and closer and reposition it and hide it. They'd have to hide it somehow, right? Remember, the Gaza Strip is like a prison. So you can't just walk around there with guns trying to, come by and look at the fence and plant things, right? For this to go down, it's ridiculous. It was infamously known as the Iron Wall, this barrier. And then they talk about, the surprise. The fence was breached at 29 points, according to the Israel Defense Force. Even though there were Israeli guard towers positioned every 500 feet along the perimeter of the wall at some points, the fighters appeared to encounter little resistance. That's Washington Post. Right? And the border was minimally staffed. It became apparent, with much of Israel's military diverted to focus on unrest in the West Bank. So the people that were supposed to be guarding it just happened to be somewhere else. Now, does that sound familiar? They did say this is the new Pearl Harbor, and it's just like Pearl Harbor. At Pearl Harbor, everybody got the day off. They happened to have the day off the day it happens. And here, apparently, Israel's military just happened to be at the other side of the country. Right. And then Matthew Levitt, the director of the counterterrorism program at the Washington Institute of the Near East Policy, says, still, the idea of a bulldozer getting that close to the fence at all just boggles the mind. Yeah, exactly. So, it's interesting, this Washington Post article, because it's coming from the standpoint, of course, of not knowing what really happened or why there would be coordination to make this happen on purpose by members of Israeli military also working, to basically weaken themselves intentionally, to open themselves up to this attack. They're not coming at it from that perspective, but just from the perspective of how could this have happened? And they actually point out some of the inconsistencies. He said the most compelling parts of the system were the ones that provided indicators and warnings. right? So there were supposed to be sensors, indicators, warnings, remote-controlled guns, monitoring from the air, monitoring on the ground, and they just did happen not to sound an alarm significant enough to mobilize a force that would intercept these people before they went into Israeli neighborhoods, a music festival, undetected, and started slaughtering civilians. There's no way this could have happened like that, unless it was coordinated to go down like that with Israel. He says, but once you don't see in advance that someone is massed at the fence, it's still just a fence. A big fence, but just a fence. And I include that because I want to say that's right. Any defense system still comes down to the people operating it. And that's why it's a mistake to implement all these security measures and have all this national security, because in the end, the systems are going to fail. Just like whoever steered the Titanic or whoever was coordinating the defense response on September 11th, 2001, it's going to fail. If the stand down order comes down, it doesn't matter how advanced the security measures are, it's going to fail. And that's why it's always a mistake to create these systems and trade your liberty for security. Because the more security there is, harsher and harsher systems, they're going to fall, they're going to fail, they're going to fall, they're going to break time and time again until the people give up all their power and freedom. Because this is the plan. This is the plan of collectivism and totalitarianism. The people have to give up everything, and only then will they be left alone. But until they give up everything, you're going to have more and more and more attacks and failures of more complex and more complex systems. If they do bring in that Israeli Iron Beam, it's going to fail too eventually, until everybody has what? The biometric data, the forced injections, the social credit system. Hey, this is Agenda 21. This shit's on paper, guys. Like, this is real. Like I mentioned before, this is just the surface level stuff. They say they want to do this. This is not even the stuff they don't talk about children, right? About pedophilia. This is not even that stuff. This is just the surface level stuff. They want total control. So this high-tech military fence failed, and whatever replaces it will fail too. 100-foot electric fence, biometric scanning and tracking, or even if they build a damn moat, it's going to fail because it was intended to fail. So that's about them breaching the fence. Now, an hour and a half into this video, I'm going to go into the level of organization of the attackers as they breached the fence and actually went in to slaughter civilians, right? So a lot of this material, I'm going to shout them out. There's a Telegram channel called South First Responders. It's from the people who are coming in after the tragedies occur, Israeli first responders to find survivors, to basically document the events and all this. So I'm aware of the fact that this stuff is going to have a pro-Israel propaganda leaning, of course, but it doesn't matter because it's the source material. You could look at the material and you could see, you could analyze it for yourself if you think it's real or not. And you look at the images and what is going on in those places, at those videos, you could see that it's real. Like, I'm talking about people being, just killed, butchered, and the aftermath of tragedies, burnings, explosions. This is what it is. You could see the extent of the human suffering there. So this is a video. Where, of course, I don't understand what they're saying, but their comments on it are: here's the video from Ra'em. In the background, you can hear a member of the security forces describing what happened. He said later, off camera, that these terrorists had explosives specifically designed for closed spaces. Notable, he said that this style of explosives is unlike anything known to this region. So this is the Gaza Strip and the surrounding areas, right? Explosives are nothing new. They get explosives all the time. But this is a person saying, these are explosives specifically designed for closed spaces that went on. went off in houses and caused such a high death toll. Because they're claiming a high death toll, they needed a high death toll. 1,400 people, that's a lot of people. And it's clear that the Hamas terrorists who went in to do this, to perform these massacres, they were equipped to get the maximum number. This is how it goes. This is a serious operation now. And it really goes way above jihad. It goes way above religious extremism, because this is a systematic operation, right? This is a military style operation, a Western military style operation, to get the shock value, to get the public outrage, to get the global push, to get the world to paint this particular group as total barbarians, because that's what will get them to hand over their money and their support to perpetuate the war machine, which after Hamas is destroyed will be used against the citizens, the same ones who gave their money and energy away to build the war machine system. Remember, the guns are always turned on the citizens. Always. So, that was the first video. Then this image here shows a payment on one of the dead Hamas members. It shows a payment from the Palestinian Ministry of the Interior and National Security. This is a paycheck. There's all this talk about them being paid by Israel, paid by Iran, about different countries supporting Hamas. But this is an official paycheck, and I said this 2 weeks ago. I said, hey, these guys don't look like they're doing some kind of holy war. These look like paid mercenaries. And if they're paid mercenaries, then we gotta ask, who's paying them and what interest do they have in paying them, right? Now, what's interesting about the state of Palestine that you see here, paying this guy, is because that's the official Palestine government, but that Palestinian Ministry of the Interior, they control the West Bank. They don't control Gaza. Gaza's at the other side of the country, and Gaza's the official ruling part. Hamas is like the Nazi party in Germany. So they took over Gaza and they rule it, right? So Hamas is in charge of the Gaza Strip. Now the state of Palestine, what they call the Fatah government, that's like the more, less militant government. That's kind of like the puppet government, and they control the West Bank. And the Fatah government and Hamas have been fighting with each other. They actually had a war. So if you imagine, this is like the other side of a war that lost, the domestic civil war, is paying Hamas. Right? They're paying these guys. We don't know for what. We don't know if the payment is for them to commit genocides or we don't know what it is. But the fact that you're finding official documents, this shows that the geopolitical games that are being played are multi-layered, and it's not as simple. Like, it doesn't make sense. People aren't really pointing this out. Like, why are there government payments to these guys that are going to end up in these situations where they're killing civilians in Israel? Because this is totally not in the West Bank. This is not in anybody's best interest politically. They're going to get crushed. This is like political self-sabotage to be paying terrorists, right? For the Fatah government in the West Bank to be paying Hamas terrorists is not in their interest at all. It boggles the mind, just like that bulldozer. But there it is. There's the official signature and the official stamp. Well, here's their statement. Of the many papers we obtained from the Hamas terrorist bodies, we found an official Palestinian interior paycheck with a few notable details. This terrorist is a mid-level officer and receives over 5,000 shekels a month. This is a considerably high salary in Gaza received from official authorities. Where this money comes from and at what expense we do not know, but it shows to us yet more details that this is a highly sophisticated and well-funded military force that was directed to target civilians in our towns. They're correct about that. The level of sophistication and the funding is there, and it's not coming from the Gaza Strip. Now they're going to tell you it's Iran because they want to drive the global opinion against Iran for U.S. conflict with Iran and Syria. Another thing that happened is we have now airstrikes, U.S. airstrikes in Syria. I haven't even had time to look into it. And more images. This is actually an image of, all these images are from the dead bodies of the Hamas members, right? They actually have them divided into operating areas, like a military mission. But remember, their military operation is to kill as many civilians as possible. But this is done in such a systematic way. They have different areas. They have areas of deployment, right? Just like a real military, but they're not doing anything that makes sense. It does not make sense to just, they cross a barrier, they cross a fence, and they don't even go against the occupying force. They go directly against their interest to kill civilians. What sense does that make? It's a new level of illogical. It's a new level of illogical that you're being manipulated into accepting. And you have your charts, your nice little PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets of, I don't know specifically what each page is, but this is basically like a report of what they will encounter, where to find the civilians, where to find the victims. It's like logistical stuff. In these tables, I think there is like data on the vehicles and even the ambulances, or things like that. All these images, and here you have the handbook with the Hamas logo. So this isn't just a bunch of guys coming out of huts or anything like that, or some guys that are just getting together. This is a well coordinated, sophisticated organization. Look at this. What they have. They have these little sheets of data on the vehicles that they'll encounter, right? The reason I show this is to show how professional it looks, how Western it looks. Actually, this is the kind of stuff that you'd expect from a Western covert military force, and this is what they get. They get like data reports of where they're gonna kill the most civilians, of what kind of car there is. This is not a holy war. So somebody is paying them to create maximum carnage, and when you see that, you're seeing all the images of what's going on. And then I'll talk about, I'll play some of the videos of what this actually looks like as they're in effect. You should start to see the whole thing fit together, how well equipped they are, how they're paid, how it seems like the road the fence just opens up for them to come in and commit indiscriminate violence for maximum death toll. It's you see this stuff. I'll just go straight into the videos because I'm gonna go around in circles, right? So this is the video of the roundabout chase. You basically have these armored vehicles, or these vehicles with guys with assault rifles, and they're seeing any vehicle that's driving by. They're basically killing them. You see, there's a man running out with his daughter or somebody in the car, and he runs the wrong way, and basically they just fire on him and kill him. But the thing that strikes me about this video is look at the time and look at the free range. They're driving around like there's no. Where is the military? Like I said in the beginning, where is all the Israeli military? Where is their Israeli police? They should be outnumbering them 10-1, but they're in a town, and they're the only ones in the town. The only cars in town are the occasional civilian vehicle that basically gets slaughtered. how did this happen? You know, the streets are empty. How did they get all this time? And they don't look like they're in a hurry. These guys are comfortable. They're just hunting. And with this video, though, I just have to mention, you know, of course, easier said than done, right? But this just shows how, if you're ever in a situation where you've got a vehicle that is a threat to you, someone in a vehicle, you know, the street is not in play anymore. You got to start jumping fences. You got to start climbing the wall, because you see this man. I understand that he was, you know, he didn't know that this car was on the other side, but, you know, if you see somebody with a gun on the street, you know, in a car, you cannot run down the street in any direction. You have to start going lateral. I guess I just include that here. Then you have this video of a wounded Hamas member. This is a guy that got shot. And basically, they're just collecting his weapons and getting ready to go on. And this is another example to me of mercenary behavior. There's not really a lot of emotion. Not that you'd expect too much emotion from terrorists, but you know, even prayer, like no prayer, no type of reverence from a combatant, a brother in combat that was wounded. If you really believed in what you were doing, you would feel something. There would be something there, right? But you don't see that. You see only just basic anxiety, like the type of a toy soldier or boy soldier. They talk to each other. I don't understand what they're saying. But then you see this other guy come up. He's he's not exactly a super soldier. He's not exactly in the gym 5 days a week, right? Like, these are the guys we're talking about. And there's 25,000 of them tops, and there are over 200,000 of well-equipped Israeli members of the police and military that could hold them off. They're outnumbered 9 to 1, 10 to 1, and it's these type of guys. And these type of guys did all this, and nobody stopped them. How did that happen? This particular group of several combatants, you can see there was about 6 or 7 of them, they were actually held off for a while by 2 members of Israeli security forces, not even military, right? 2 security guards, essentially. That's who held them off for a while, and that just goes to show what this would look like. What would it look like if the full Israeli military was deployed where it should be deployed? This kind of stuff doesn't happen. And we don't have the current siege in Gaza, and we don't have the incoming ground invasion of Gaza. This is how it happens. Now, the last video that I'll show is the video that shows the actual fence and the broken barrier. So I'll let this play for a while. This is a longer one. I'm going to get a drink in the meantime. We'll get to the end of this video. So, you see how much space there is. This is the one thing this video shows. It is the vast space there. And how if you were approaching this at the initial invasion, you know, they said that the explosions were dropped on the observation towers, but they didn't drop an explosive on every tower. And the towers are very close together. And you see how much noise you make, how much space there is, how obvious it is to approach this fence. And you see the fence is already broken, and they have like a little platform to drive over. There's not a huge scene. There's not even a big sense of urgency. These guys this stuff just worked, and they did this in 29 separate points. It went off without a hitch. You don't hear about any failed instances of breaking the fence. Where they were supposed to break the fence, they broke the fence and they went in. And then you put that together with all these other videos of these vehicles, these Toyota pickup trucks with 4 guys with assault rifles, and they're just riding through cities. You don't see a lot of even crossfire, like a lot of fire between 2 military groups. It's usually firing at civilians that we're seeing and pursuing civilians, and the occasional gunfight. This happened because of the coordination. And I hope that this, I brought a lot of different things here. There's a lot more material out there, but what there isn't enough of is time. Because it would take a lot of time to go through all of this and integrate the research and put it together. I did want to bring everything I have that I can make sense of and put together, and just bring that forth as a picture of what's really going on. And you can decide for yourself from those videos if that looks normal to you, if that looks like just a bunch of guys from Gaza to you. Because to me, it's just another Pearl Harbor, it's another 9/11, it's another Gulf of Tonkin, it's another sinking of Lusitania, it's another Lavon affair. It's another instance of a tragedy, a loss of life being allowed to occur, followed by lies and propaganda to get people to support invasion of people's individual rights, to get people to support the violence of the fruits of their labor by increased taxes and military spending, and ultimately, step by step, slowly, the advance of collectivism and totalitarianism. So in conclusion, terrorism is controlled opposition. The whole thing is controlled opposition. Because when you think about it, think about the absolute insanity of employing violence against women and children, like civilians, to obtain your sovereignty. Like, these are supposed to be people who want to be free from Israeli rule, the Israeli imperialism, which is real. Like, the Israeli imperialism is a part of this that I haven't even been talking about too much, but you know, it's obvious, right? And so they're fighting against that. They would have the moral high ground. They could easily have the public opinion, and this is what was happening like 15 years behind 15 years in the past. The global opinion was very much pro-Palestine and not so much pro-Israel, and that's changed because of the rise of Hamas as well. It's allowed this shift of public opinion, and you see, Hamas is controlled opposition. It's one big destroyer of any hope of Palestinian freedom or any kind of, you know, defending or safeguarding of their individual rights. The biggest enemy of any possibility of the advancement of the people living in Gaza is Hamas. Hamas is their biggest enemy because they're the ones who are getting their hospitals bombed, and then you know, there's no way out for them. They're presenting themselves as the saviors of a people who are paying the price for their actions. They don't, you know, because their goal is not to actually defeat Israel. Their goal is to keep taking money from all these foreign supporters, of all these foreign funders, and they want to keep participating in that chaos, to keep getting paid, and just act in that and get as much as they can. They're no different from Israel or any type of other parasitic government. Okay, that's Hamas. And I'll just stress the illogicality of this operation. It doesn't make sense for them to do it. This is why I don't buy the way they're painting them, because even in a religious extremism type of sense, it doesn't make sense what Hamas is doing. It only makes sense if you're just taking money, and if you're just an immoral piece of shit that, you know, we'll just do what you're told, which is what Hamas is doing, and ultimately is what the Israeli military is doing too. So these type of actions of like how they had the reports on the vehicles, right, and they were getting over the fence, they get over the fence, there's guys on paragliders, there's guys on bikes, this type of like guerrilla warfare, real, like, you know, sticks and stones type of makeshift military force. Now, that's close to me because some of these aspects are they share they have a lot in common with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and then the 1944 Warsaw Uprising. It had some of these qualities, and what I mean by that is like the sabotaging of one Nazi vehicle under occupation was like something to celebrate, because this is occupation. The people in Gaza, they're living under military occupation. So that resonates with me. You know, the killing of one Nazi soldier was like a victory for the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. You know, these are guys that they had some type of ancient old gun and a couple of bullets, and the rest they did with Molotov cocktails, with sabotage. And if they could get one car to break down of this high-tech force that was the Nazi army, high-tech, trained, outnumbering force, if they could get one, that was a victory. But in 1943, they're basically fighting essentially with sticks and stones. And that's what resistance under occupation looks like. And it seems like this is what they're trying to be. But these guys have rifles, they have plenty of ammo, they have mounted machine guns, they have rocket weaponry, they have printed and laminated battle plans, and foreign paychecks. What is this? What is this? There's support from all different foreign funders of these people. And I think that when you look at all this that I presented, it proves it conclusively. So that was a rough one. That was a rough video. That was a tough one to do just because of how much there is. And it took a while. But for anybody that's been paying attention, I think you'll find a lot of valuable information there. And I'm very ready to move on with my life with this Israel and Hamas stuff. But there's a lot more information out there. But you see how it goes in the 21st century? There's going to be a lot of footage. And there's going to be a lot of proof. And just the amount of information, it forces you, if you're really being honest, to really work hard to categorize and delineate truth from fiction and what is really going on, because nothing about this is easy. Nothing about the whole Israel-Hamas thing is easy. When you go into all the countries, the different deals, the economic powers there, the ideological powers, right? The interplay between people, because remember, when I say a group of Satanists controls the world, they're not all buddy-buddy, they're fighting with each other, right? What they share is the ideology that we are their slaves, and that's what's important. That's the most important thing to convey here. So don't ever think that you're gonna end up benefiting from taking a side in war, any kind of political side. And anything we talk about, the next word any of us says about Israel or Hamas or mass shootings or even the guy in Maine or airstrikes in Syria, it should be, hey, all of government are terrorists, and there's an ancient plan to bring in an international system of slavery, and we've been living in slavery since the dawn of civilization, and we need to assert our individual rights, and we need to live in harmony with each other through adhering to objective morality. And then we could talk about war. So thank you very much for viewing the video. I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.